my first information would be there is a direct live streaming in the internet, so please think about it during the next hour here in this conference. So I'm really happy to see you here, and I would like to welcome you of the behalf of the Foundation for German-Polish Cooperation. Especially, I would like to welcome the guest from Germany who arrived here. We are still waiting for a few other persons. We have got the information that the flight from Frankfurt is a little bit late, so during the next hour I think we will have a few persons more here in this room. Gentlemen, more than 20 years ago, when Chancellor Kohl and Prime Minister Mazowiecki have established the foundation, the main task of the foundation was to support the reconciliation and cooperation between Poles and Germans. Today, 24 years later, German, Poles, and all Europeans should try to define our mutual interest in the growing European Union. And with this expectation, Markus Meckel and Professor Rothfeld discussed these challenges and chances in the last months. And the foundation decided to establish here in Warsaw the project Discussion on the Future of Europe, which we are going to run simultaneously with a German-Polish roundtable in Berlin. So our interest here should be to define a number of topics, could be controversial topics, but a number of topics which are relevant for both countries in the context of European integration. What does it mean? Topics not only important for the bilateral relations, but topics which are important in the context of the European Union. And one of these topics is, of course, Eastern Partnership and the case of Ukraine. And I think it will be one of the topics of our discussion. But the other question could be, for example, the solution for the banking union. And you probably know that there are still open questions in this context, and the next EU summit should solve these questions. So before I give over to Mr. Meckel and Mr. Rothfeld, I would like to thank to Josef Janning, who prepared an excellent paper. And we will have the opportunity to discuss the paper tomorrow. Today's discussion I would define as a kind of brainstorming. And after this discussion, we will have a dinner and a dinner speech by former President Kwaśniewski in the basement of this house. So we have about 1.5 hours here to define our challenges and questions for our work in the next months. So let me start with Professor Rothfeld.
It is always a problem when you have, I would say, the group of very competent people. To say something new is not an easy task, because in fact everybody knows more than you are going to say. Nevertheless, it is, I would say, since I accepted some month ago, I would say, this invitation, I decided, I would say, to share with you what I'm thinking, not nothing what has to be said, but what I'm thinking about the subject at the moment. First, since you mentioned, I would say, the beginning of the new type of Polish-German relations in 89, 90, I have to say that at that time, Minister Skubiszewski defined, I would say, as a kind of the not model but a concept strategy for Polish-German relations as community of interest. He didn't speak about community of values, but community of interest. And I would like to say that, in fact, there are three factors which are for the policy deciding. It is values, interest, and power. And within the European Union, values are considered as a kind of the common, universal point of departure. Then you have, I would say, differentiation of interest, and within the European Union, power is mainly reduced to soft power, the power in a sense of traditional understanding, namely armaments, weapons, etc., is not the strongest part of the European Union. In the opposite, we are speaking a lot about common security and foreign policy, common defense policy, but it exists in the form of different type of decisions, resolutions, concepts, but not as the reality. Coming back, I would say, to this Polish-German relations, I would like to say that this concept of the Polish-German community of interest was new in a sense that it is maybe worth to remember, not for people in this room, but in general, for the reason that since the end of the Cold War, since the end of the Second World War, is already almost 70 years. We have 3 generations, and some people, they do not remember what were decisive, I would say, motives of organizing European order after the Second World War. And as far as Poland and Germany is concerned, the Stalin's concept was to do his utmost to make the Polish-German reconciliation, or I would say communality, impossible. And I'm not going to develop. I would like to say that he said it very bluntly when some Western politicians, especially Churchill and de Gaulle, discussed with him whether Poland should be offered, I would say, such a portion of German territory as a compensation for the territory which were lost and taken by Stalin in the East. It was more than 40% of the Polish territory, and we received, as the result of the Yalta-Potsdam Agreement, more than 20%. In other words, half of that what we lost in the East, but less than half, but nevertheless it was much more significant. And Stalin said, I'm doing this not only with an intention to weaken Germany and to strengthen Poland, however it is also important, but to make the Polish-German alliance impossible in the centuries ahead. And I would like to say that it was diabolic way of thinking, but I didn't know that I will be a witness of the fundamental change of circumstances, that without the change of borders, we have, between Poland and Germany, the relations were never as good as they are at the moment. And what is even more important, that the prevailing majority of the political forces in Poland, maybe even with some over-exaggeration, I would say that all responsible political forces in Poland are very much interested to have the best possible relations with Germany. It seems to me that it is something similar in Germany as well. And as the result, it is, I would say, a unique situation in order, I would say, to construct the common policy. Point number 2 is the following, that very often all of us, we are speaking about the new global and new regional order, in a sense that the Cold War system is replaced by the new system, or I would say by chaos. People spoke about, I would say, a multipolar world. However, I do repeat very often that polarity, it is something unique, and it happened once in the history as the result of the Cold War, but because poles are only two, plus and minus. You cannot speak about multipolarity or unipolarity. It does not exist. But you can speak about polycentric world. And this polycentric world is homogeneous. Not homogeneous. It is not homogeneous. It is heterogeneous. In the period of the Cold War, we have had, I would say, homogeneous East and homogeneous West. And the rest, it was the third world, which was beyond our discussion, because it was something not taken under consideration in the context of security. Situation changed dramatically after the end of the Cold War. We have a polycentric world which is heterogeneous, and as the result, we are now confronted, for example, with a situation in Ukraine, because Ukraine was not seen by many in the West as something what is worth to discuss, because it is a waste of time. And I can tell you, it was a kind of the anecdotal situation, but nevertheless it happened that in my capacity as a minister, I was asked by Jack Straw to make an introduction at the Gimnich type meeting in Newport about Ukraine. And I said what I considered that it is significant, and then in the discussion, suddenly my neighbor on my right side, it was in alphabetical order after Poland, it is Pays-Bas. No, Pays-Bas on the left and Portugal on the right. Yes, and the Portuguese minister, who was the very competent professor of history, started to discuss that in fact Ukraine, what we are speaking about, Ukraine does not exist as a nation. Ukraine, it is not a state. It is between us, because it is Gimnich type, behind the closed doors, without secretaries, etc. We have to say very openly to each of us, to each other, that Ukraine is, in fact, in reality, it is the part of Russia, and Ukrainian language, it is the Russian dialect. It is not a nation. And I do remember that the Dutch foreign minister sent me a card. Are you going to ignore what he's saying? I responded to him. It is my problem how to respond in few words. But nevertheless, I decided to take the floor, and I said, in fact, we are behind this table. We are very different, with different experience. And taking seriously what is offered by us, by my highly distinguished and learned neighbor on the right, in fact, I raise a question for myself, what some countries are doing here. For example, Belgium did not exist before 1830, or Finland. Finland was divided between Russia and Sweden, and etc. And I continued, I would say. It is, in other words, the history is a process. Nation is the product of this process. And Ukrainian nation is fact of life. And we observed, because it was in 2005, we observed a year ago what happened in Ukraine. I suppose that professor changed his mind later on, not as a result of my response, but I'm saying this only with the intention to illustrate that for some people in the West, especially those who are really very far, and I said that usually I'm listening with great attention when people from the Western and south of Europe are speaking about the North Africa, because I know that they know much more than me. I have, I would say, some intuitions, but I will never inform you what is going on in Morocco, Tunisia, in Maghreb, or in some other countries. And please believe me, when I'm speaking about Ukraine, I know what I'm speaking about. It is really a totally different situation. Now, in the context of Polish-German relations, Ukraine is a kind of the illustration for the new challenge. Namely, definitely Ukraine is not ready to be seen as a prospective member of the European Union in next 20 years. It is out of question. But at the same time, what Ukraine was asking for, namely this association treaty, it was not about membership. Turkey signed, I would say, in '63, in other words, 50 years ago. And we are still confronted with the question, what will be done after Erdogan, as you know, defined, I would say, the time frame up to 2020. He said that he would like to know whether the European Union is going to consider seriously Turkey as a candidate to the European Union or not. In other words, we offered for Ukraine something what is, in my view, not only attractive, but first of all, what is a kind of the invitation to modernize the country and to make the choice, strategic choice for the Ukrainian nation. And if it is successful in Ukraine, then definitely sooner than later it will be done in Russia as well. And this is the problem why Russia is reacting in such angry way, because it will be done in Russia as well, but with totally different leadership. Therefore, we have to think, when we are speaking about something in common between Poland and Germany, as far as Europe is concerned, we should think about not situation what will be done in next year or in 2 years, but in 20 years from now. In other words, for the new Russian leadership, for the new generation. And I would like to tell you here something what is not politically very, very correct. People who are considering that the new generation will be much better is wrong. It could be better, but it could be much worse. And in other words, we are not condemned for something that the situation in Russia will be developed from bad to better. It could be developed from bad to worse. And in my view, the new generation very often demonstrates, I would say, this very negative possible perspective. Therefore, it is a need to offer, I would say, a kind of the concept, the set of ideas which could be discussed with an intention to prepare the new generation of the Russian leaders for the development which will modernize and democratize Russia. Some people are saying that even today I was the witness of the discussion when people said that Russia, because of the Orthodox Church, because of the tradition, etc., is not prepared to be a democratic whatsoever. It is, in other words, Russia, because of the Byzantine tradition, because of Asian tradition, it has a mentality of the country which will never be a democratic country. I would like to say that, in my view, it is unacceptable thinking, because people are considering that something what they know will be the same, but maybe a little bit improved or more perfect. I would like to tell you that many countries in Europe, they did not have an experience of democracy, and now they are very democratic. It is true that, because as an argument was presented, Greece, because of the Orthodox Church, is not prepared to be a democratic country, because Greece is much more corrupted, much more, etc. I would like to say that it is not because of the Orthodox Church. In my view, there are some other reasons, and nobody is somehow free of this type of errors and wrong decisions. There are a lot of factors, but my point is that between us, between Poland and Germany, we have some common experience, and what will be offered to Europeans jointly as a Polish-German way of thinking will be taken seriously, not only because Germany is highly respected as a country of success, and to some extent in the central eastern part of Europe, Poland is also the country of success in recent 20 years. But it will be taken seriously simply because people know that we have our own historical experience. In order to not to speak too long, I will simply illustrate that by the very common anecdote in 1890, that when many Western journalists visited Poland, and some of them raised the question, what are you going to do with that disaster of economy, of internal social situation in the country? And the response was that there are two ways. One is, I would say, the normal one. Another is a kind of the miracle. And the question was, what is the normal one? And the normal one, the response is that angels will step down on the Polish soil and will resolve the problem instead of us. And what is the miracle? And miracle is that we will do it for ourselves. And I would like to say that we experienced that miracle. However, people who have done this, I would say most of them are already, I would say, not among us. I would say one of the last who died a few weeks ago, Tadeusz Mazowiecki, they knew from the very beginning, not now, not later on, but they knew in the moment what they are doing is unpopular and they will pay very high price. But they were so much oriented, devoted, and I would say they were able to sacrifice their own careers, having in mind an interest of the country. Unfortunately, we have at the moment very few people in the new generation who are as, I would say, idealistic and enthusiastic. But maybe I would say one should be much more pragmatic and simply to think that it will be done because the new generation, sooner or later, rather sooner than later, will take the full responsibility both in Germany and in Poland. And in fact, we have still most of the names are for recent 20 years with us in Germany and in Poland. In case that you would ask me to tell who are the most responsible and popular politicians in Germany, I will mention those whom I met first of all, for the first time at the beginning of the 90s. And my last point in this context is that the situation of security situation changed in many respects, because security is very low on the list of priority in our countries. Even more, I would say that foreign policy is very low on the list of priorities, because usually in Poland people were saying that foreign policy is by function of internal developments. At the moment, it is not function of the internal development. It is an instrument of internal policy. Foreign policy is considered by politicians as an instrument to exercise their domestic internal problems. In other words, not only in Poland, not only in Germany, but also in Russia, in the United States, everywhere. In other words, security in traditional sense and foreign policy lost their significance for simple reasons. There is no direct threat. There is no direct threat of war, of bloody conflict. And people, for example, not only in Germany, but also in France and Great Britain, are not going, I would say, to accept the military expenditures. However, they know that the new weapons, the cyberspace, really requires a total rearmaments, and rearmaments will cost a lot, but they are not prepared, I would say, to pay for that, because they are considering there is no threat, and we have some social expenditures which should be taken now, tomorrow, in 2 weeks from now. But what I'm saying them that it is, I would say, a need to think about, I would say, next 20 years, because in order of rearmaments, the industry should be totally changed, and there is a need to invest a lot in that, what will be important for us in 20, 25 years from now. People are not, they are not prepared to listen. In Poland, fortunately, we do not have such a situation, and it is a kind of the consensus in Poland. It is criticized, but nevertheless, I would say that majority of Poles, they still have historical memory that country, in order to be secure, should be prepared for the possible attacks from outside. And in a sense, it makes, I would say, our relations with Russia very delicate, because nobody is speaking openly that Russia is the potential aggressor, but everybody knows that we are not speaking about cosmics, we are speaking about some very specific countries. And in Russia, they also know. In other words, here is the problem that with Russia, relations should be organized in a little bit different way, starting from two very fundamental expectations, namely more transparency and more confidence. And how to develop this the strategy of confidence, it is a problem. It happened that I'm doing this for recent 5 years in contact with Russia, and I have to say that on one hand, we were able to achieve something what was beyond my dreams, especially as far as the Catholic Church in Poland and Orthodox Church in Russia, which is, I would say, something I wanted very much. I have done a lot in order, I would say, to encourage Russian Orthodox Church, but I didn't know that I will be successful in that. And I noticed, after first my talk with them, I noticed that my fears that they are not prepared to be open for cooperation were totally unjusted. In other words, both Patriarch and his deputy Metropolitan Hilarion, both of them responded in very cooperative way. And at the moment, it seems to me that it is in Russia a kind of the strong spiritual, I would say, potential of the influence of church, because the church has some special role to play in the Russian society, and I don't know to what extent it is respected by the leadership, political leadership of Russia. Nevertheless, it is very positive factor. Another element was to open the border against, I would say, resistance of the European Union. In Königsberg, Kaliningrad, I would say this district, was not considered by Poland as a kind of the such bureaucratic, in a way that bureaucratic approach would be to offer for Russians the same territory as it was. In other words, Russians would be allowed to go to the Polish forest to pick up the mushrooms. And that was because there are no cities, I would say, in the distance comparable to Kaliningrad. We offered them 5 times more, and the European Union rejected at the beginning. And now I can say 1 year after, there were no incidents. It is very positive. It is, in other words, demonstration effect is really something what we did not expect. There are some other elements as well. Contacts immediately when non-governmental organizations were persecuted in Russia, especially those who have had, I would say, contact with the Western institutions, we decided, I would say, to address our initiatives and openness to universities. And I would like to say that we were able in recent 1 year to establish with many universities in the province, including in Siberia, in Buryatia, and I would like to say that we have had the day before yesterday 3 days conference about the search of the new identity in Russia, such a conference which was, I would say, really on highest possible level, and the best Russian researchers came from different parts, and they were very critical about the situation in Russia, much more critical about themselves than Poles were able to discuss in similar language with them about our problems. And in other words, I would like to say that we should differentiate Russia and not to consider what is presented by President Putin. It is very important because it reflects probably majority of the majority votes in possible elections. Many people of the province, they still are oriented to the central the centers of the political life, because I would say the concept of Putin was to replace the Yeltsin's strategy by the new strategy, and he declared at that time, as you remember, vertikala vlasti, that means the vertical of power, and this vertical of power is implemented to the absurd. Now he is going, I would say, to change to some extent because he knows already that it's overdone. Nevertheless, Russia is oriented, I would say, to rearmaments, and in view of Putin, Russia will be respected only being a strong military power. And it is a wrong concept, criticized by many his friends. Nevertheless, it is supported by the great majority. On the other hand, intellectuals, elites, they are more and more disappointed, dissatisfied. I'm saying all this with an intention that discussing among ourselves, we should take under consideration that it will be our headache in the next probably 10 or 15 years. Our concept should be addressed to the situation after the present leadership, because this leadership will not be able, I would say, to modernize Russia and to be open with the West. Probably I have to stop because I can speak longer, but it is my problem always to be disciplined. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Rothfeld, for this excellent introduction. You mentioned a lot of topics we should discuss. In the meantime, our group became bigger and bigger. I would like to welcome here Professor Osiatinski and Director Bill, and give over to Markus Meckel to continue our introduction.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy that we are together here in this room. Usually the council of that foundation has its meetings, and because I'm one of the chairs of that. I'm very happy to say welcome to the new director, Mr. Mischak.
Thank you very much.
And I think it is a good situation that we start exactly in this moment when we have two new directors. The German one started in last summer. Now we have a new one from Poland, and we are starting with the project of that talks or discussions about Europe. This idea was a little bit older, but now we managed to establish it. And the aim is to make Warsaw a place of strategic debate about Europe. And the main idea was to bring Germans and Poles together with others. In the future, we would like to have three-thirds, a third Germans, a third Polish, and another third of other Europeans invited. It depends from the topic we are choosing to discuss, and we together decided to start with such kind of a first brainstorming discussion to raise the issues, and so I'm really happy that we will have tomorrow morning to discuss the paper of Josef Janning, because I think this brings up many of the topics we have to discuss in Europe at all. If we see the German-Polish situation, we have to see that German played and had to play, and both happened, an important role to overcome the crisis of the euro. But we all know too that it was not easy to go that way, and there was some criticism in some countries in Europe, and in the same time there was much support from Poland. Exactly in these ways, and this was important, I think. The next is that we could observe that in this crisis, Poland was the only country which, in the best way, overcame this crisis economically, and this is, in my view, another important point. Poland developed during the last 5-6 years really to be an important player in Europe and playing for stability and the future of Europe. But the question is how stable this development is. If we see the domestic situation in Poland, so I would like to ask our Polish friends, what's your view about that? If I see right, we have that government we can trust in, but will bring the next election if we see different other powers, and are they strong enough and have this the same line really to give Europe the priority before other so-called national interests? And so I think both of us in general today are understanding that the so-called national interests are not so important as Europe at all, that Europe is priority, and that we have, I could say, the real and long-term national interest is to have and to give Europe the priority. And I think this is done today in Poland and in Germany, and so we are good partners for that. I will start with, to start our general discussion with 8 remarks. The first is, the first remark is, not at first EU, it's a transatlantic relation. If I, looking back during the last 2 decades, and especially in the end of the 90s and the beginning of the 20s, then it was clear that in security issues, for instance, it was clear for Poland that NATO has to take it. And when we started after San Malo with European defense and security policy, Poland was very skeptical and reluctant to support it. And when the Americans were skeptical, Poland was much more in this time. And this changed completely. And we had and could observe during the time that there was sometimes in Europe a beauty test between different European states who's closer to the United States. As general, UK is feeling that it is mostly on the side on United States. Germany was usually saying we are very clear on the side of United States in the transatlantic relations, but it is not an opposite to be a strong partner in EU, which was a little bit different with France. And Poland was very clear that priority was to be partners of United States, the transatlantic relations, and you could see it in the last years when we had the anti-ballistic missile defense issue. It was very clear that this was for Poland the priority, and so this kind of special partnership, I think, lost its interest because it failed in the end. And so I would say that today more and more the recognition is increasing that not any single nation or country can have that and stabilize that partnership, but only Europe at all. A more united Europe will be the real partner in the transatlantic partnership. That's my deep conviction. And that's why we have to shape a strong united Europe, a strong united European Union, in order to become a real partner of the United States at eye level, which we are not in many fields until now. In past, it seemed to be that the best partner of United States is only following the United States position. Today, we more and more have to acknowledge that we can really good partners, even if we have own positions, and can fight for that and find compromises. Europe, which is able to act in common, which is able to solve problems and to take its own responsibility, will be able to be a real partner for United States. And if we see that actual crisis, that current crisis with NSA and some other things, in my view, this is not so important. Important is that we stick to that problems, that we are self-confident on the one hand, and on the other hand to see and to bring it to the right balance with other problems. And here I think it is very clear that we in the future need, as always in the last decades, very strong and important transatlantic partnership. But the precondition is that we take more responsibility. We have to be aware that we as Europeans have to take, especially in the field of security, take more own responsibility. The second point is Poland to become a long-term strategic partner shaping Europe. If you see the German-France relationship, it is common sense that this was in the future, in past, the motor of European integration, and I think this will continuously be necessary but I think it's not enough. Not only because France has difficulties for its own with reforms and in their own identity, but also because it's not enough that it needs more than only two big countries in that enlarged European Union. And Poland, almost 10 years now, member of the European Union, made a good job in this, and especially its presidency was really a crucial success. And if you see the economic development, the German wording of polnische Wirtschaft, of Polish economy, has completely changed that meaning, because that economy is really one of the most initiative and moving economy at all. But I think it will be important for the next time that Poland is making a clear decision about the Euro membership. Today, Poland is waiting for that, but I think the precondition really to get acknowledged in Europe as a real partner shaping Europe, it is a precondition that Poland is making here in this field a clear condition, is setting a roadmap in giving a clear message to the other European partners. If this is done, there will be really a chance to shape the Weimar Triangle to a real operative alliance to bring common initiatives, not only in speeches, but also really convincing and bringing it forward. The third point is foreign and defense policy. I remember Saint-Malo, it is only 15 years ago. If you see the German presidency in 1999 started to call Mr. Solana, and in my view, it was a very wise decision to bring the General Secretary of NATO to that position of the EU, and starting that process. I mentioned before that Poland was very skeptical in the beginning, but today we are on the same line. But we have to say that Poland is very active, especially in this field. If I was really disappointed some years ago when we had the situation that we had the Lisbon Treaty on the one hand, which gave the structural conditions for really a common foreign policy and defense policy. And on the other hand, in the same time, the NATO concept, you were involved, was involved in that, and Germany was falling out. Bringing any idea and initiative in that, in my view, this was a disaster, because exactly this was the situation to have a common approach for both of them, NATO and EU, in a good way to go forward, to organize a common European concept. We have the start during the last 3 years of EEAS. We know all the difficulties. It is reviewed, and we are starting to manage it hopefully in the future in a better and more structured way. But at all there's a deficit, and we all are feeling it, and that's why I think it was very good that the Weimar Triangle foreign minister 3 years ago wrote that letter to Mrs. Ashton, but there was no much result from that, and we have to see ourselves. We didn't do anything too, not only the EU, but I think our states was nothing doing too, and we should do and take initiative in this field, and that's why I'm happy that the next summit will brought that issue on the agenda. The defense and security policy, and hopefully there will be there will be some good decisions to bring it forward, and not only very little steps. What the rumor is that it will be only a very little one. Hopefully it will not happen, and we can bring it forward. Really steps of pooling and sharing, not only in speeches but with concrete steps. I think that that paper which Germany was brought to NATO about the framework nations concept, to have the bigger nations and around and together with the other nations to have regional clusters, to build them, some different regional clusters in Europe, could be a very good thing, because it is not a general decision, it is initiative of partners in Europe, and they can start immediately. And so my question is not only to have a decision in Brussels or the decision in the Council or in the summit, we can start. And in my view, we should start, and especially we, Germans and Poles, together, for instance, with the Visegrad countries. The Visegrad countries are starting to establish a common battalion. Why not do it together in an integrated way? In my view, we should do much more in that, or the question of training. We can put it together, and the question of armament, we have to strengthen the European Defence Agency and go forward really to give them responsibility. I think especially in this field we should do much more to give Europe more responsibility, and this is only possible if we are ready for ourselves to take responsibility and to do it together with our partners, if not with 28, but with our concrete neighbors, and Germany and Poland could go forward with that. Last week, and I wanted to congratulate Emma Brok because they decided in the European Parliament together with the member states to get 51 billion euro for foreign policy in the different fields, and I think this is really a success. But now we have to implement it, how to use it, to use this money, and this will be important. Fourth, on Russia, much is said before. We have to be aware that we need Russia in solving international problems. It's a part of Security Council. If you see what they managed to do in Syria, I personally didn't see that it could happen, but it happened. They managed to solve a problem which created, not to solve a problem, but to solve a problem for ourselves, and especially for Obama. But it's not only Obama, it's we as a Western world, we were involved, and so we have to continue to cooperate with Russia in security issues and in other issues as energy too. But on the other hand, we have to see very clear that in Russia there are not only some difficulties in their way towards democracy, they left the way of democratization, and they developed an authoritarian state with dangerous imperial behavior for its neighbors, and we have to deal with both of that. And so I think it is it's of crucial importance that European Union has to reconsider its policy towards Russia, and in this field, because of our different experiences and our different approaches in Germany and Poland, if we together, Germans and Poles, would develop and find a concept and could develop a concept, I'm sure that this will be very convincing for other Europeans too. That's why I think there's a special responsibility for both of us to go forward and to give some ideas for Europe to go forward in this field. Fifth, energy. In this point, it is similar. We have quite different approaches. and we have seen it in the climate conference some days before and ago, and so we see how different we are in the question of nuclear weapons, in the renewable energy, and many other things, the question of coal. All these is quite different in our situation and in our approaches. Some years ago, I made the proposal that we should establish a German-Polish Council on Energy of the governments. I continuously think that it would be good to exchange ideas, to have a continuous dialogue in this field, and the same, what I mentioned with Russia, to go forward to find compromises. Because we are so different, if Germany and Poland will find compromises in the energy field, I'm sure this will be helpful for European energy policy. 6, neighborhood and enlargement. I will make it short because we will after that have the speech of Kwasniewski, and much is said by Minister Rothfeld. But I think what happened with Ukraine, we have to reconsider our own position. In my view, it was not so sensible that we as European Union brought us to a corner only to observe what Yanukovych is doing with our precondition, with Mrs. Tymoshenko. We gave him the key what has to be done and what will be done in this field, although we, in my view, as European Union, should be interested to have the signature under this association agreement. In my view, many of you know that I was in favor of, in 2011, to give the signature on the one hand, and at the same time to criticize Yanukovych about that domestic development, but to have from this point a clear direction and orientation towards Europe, knowing that it needs a long way, as you mentioned before. It will be a long way, but the direction has to be clear, and now it is continuously open. An important point, I'm convinced, that we have in back around our own treaty. Our own treaty is very clear saying that every European country has the right to apply for membership if they meet the criteria. In 49, and I think we as member states should stick to that point. And that's why, including Belarus, I say it very clear, including Belarus, we should repeat it every day. If Belarus would meet that criteria and is willing to go that European orientation, they have the right to be members in the future. If we are ready, we have to have our own conditions. But on the other hand, it is clear that they have to meet the criteria. But to give that people, not that Lukashenko, not that Yanukovych, not the rulers, but to the people, these are Europeans, these are people who have the chance if they are able to change the situation in their countries. And that's why I think this is a very important point and would be a very important message, which we, during the last years, were not able and ready to give to their peoples. 70s, democracy and values. It is clear that we have to stick to that, but we are, in my view, not really clear. For instance, Eastern Partnership is democracy, and to stick to that values, is it the precondition for cooperation, or is it the aim of the process? And in my view, we should be very clear that we have to do all what is helping in the future going that way in these countries. And because I'm sure, coming back to that question of the signature, I'm sure that the association agreement is a step in that direction, which helps the society, help powers in the countries to go forward with that, including the civil society. And that's why we should sign. We should have to have in mind that this is the right direction, and we have to make better functioning of our instruments. If it is its idea, the European Instrument for Democracy and Human Rights, I think that a proposal of Mr. Sikorski, which is now established, the European Endowment for Democracy, is a very good and important instrument. I'm criticizing my own government that we are not ready until now really to give money in that. This 1 million is really not enough for such an important instrument and such an important message, because it could be a common project of Germany and Poland to increase exactly this way of support for civil society. And we have to be aware that foreign policy is not only dealing with governments and dealing with parliaments. It is in the same way dealing with civil societies, dealing with other part and population and structures in these different countries. The second point in that field of democracy is the domestic issue. What we have seen in Hungary now, what we have seen in Romania, we are ready to criticize others, but we have not enough instruments to really to implement this and, for instance, to give sanctions or to go forward to find a process, really to give clear lines following our values of Article 2 of the Lisbon Treaty, and we have that hammer of Article 7, but you can't start with a hammer of that way. We have to need a better procedure, and so we have to develop and to talk about. And last point, we have to try to include the people. And I think the election next year, the European election, will be a good chance really to try to involve people in the European issue. But that needs leadership. Leadership of politicians who really stick to Europe at the future, and that we in our nations are very clear that Europe is our common future, and national interest is to have a strong Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Markus, for this really broad picture. Before I open the discussion, let me add one point about the interesting study the Institute of Public Affairs and the President Jacek Kucharczyk is here, published last week about the picture of Germany in Poland. The result of this public opinion poll and the study is that 48% of Poles recognized Germany as the most important partner. On the second place is USA with 28%. On the other side, 43% of the population in Poland means that Poland and Germany have a mutual interest towards Russia, and 42% of the population means that the interests are different. So there is a difference in the Polish picture or towards Eastern Europe, and I think it's on the one hand Germany is a most important partner, on the other hand different interests in the policy towards Russia. But the floor is open. We have about half an hour for a discussion, so please introduce yourself and comment the presentations here or ask questions. Who is the first? Who would like to start?
I may.
Of course.
I was the last to come, so I will break the ice and give the first question. My name is Ireneusz Bil. I'm heading the foundation of President Aleksander Kwaśniewski. I have one remark to that what Professor Rothfeld said, and one to that of Minister Merkel. Namely, Professor Rothfeld mentioned that security is very low on the list of priorities. Last week we held here in the same, almost in the same room, but the floor beneath, a conference with the Ebert Foundation, where we had several members of the Bundestag and members of the Polish Parliament, and we debated broadly security. So my experiences from this debate was that if we can agree that on the list of the German priorities, security is not very high, I think one of the most striking differences in that what the Polish members of parliament said, and that of Polish members from the MFA or from the Ministry of Defense or from the BBN said on security, was that Poland is facing a very imminent danger in terms of security. So it was given as a paradox that Poland today has even, maybe not more, but almost the same number of Leopard 2 tanks after the last tranche that was bought from Germany. So it is surprising because in the 80s, I think in Germany there was several thousand of Leopard 2 tanks, 3,000, which the majority is sold. But Poland now has almost 200 or even over 250 German tanks. The same was said about the Iskander missiles in the Kaliningrad region, the examples of the Zapad 2013 exercises in Belarus. So my impression was that among the Polish politicians, among the Polish members of parliament, the notion of security and of even imminent danger is more present than in Germany. So also that was the first point. The second point is comparing, for example, the Polish white paper on defense that was published several months ago with the German one and the French one, which is also a very recent one. We found very much in common with the French, surprisingly, in terms of, for example, the strategy towards the tactical nuclear weapons or the contingency planning. So much more in common with the French, less with the Germans. So my impression was that it is true that in terms that it's very low on the German list of priorities, but not so much on the Polish side. In terms many interesting issues that you have raised, Mr. Minister, I'd like to focus only on one, on energy, because you said that we have to some extent try to combine these different approaches in terms of energy policy and find compromises between energy policies in Germany and in Poland. It will be very difficult because Germany is phasing out of nuclear energy. Poland tries to build a nuclear plant. Germany has phased out of hard coal. Poland is still, I think, prioritizing hard coal, despite many environmental question marks. So my point is that there is some common ground to be found, but I think in the area of green energy, because Poland's let's say population and settlement patterns are so dispersed that we could use that experience of German green energy to use in some kind of a local power plants, regional power plants, not so much centralized as it was in the past. And we have, I think, also a rising understanding how much green energy is important. To me, very surprising, but also, I think, very telling was the decision of the Krakow municipality to ban the use of coal in heating the municipality houses, which is, I think, 70 or 80% of the houses in Krakow use hard coal to heat it. So to phase out within a few years is very striking. I think also a good example in which direction we should use the German example.
Thank you very much, Irek. I think it's important to raise these controversial questions, and the perception of security is one of them, and energy, of course, too. So let's continue. Christoph von Masch.
I have also a mixture of comment and question, mainly stemming from the fact that I've been living the last 8 years in the United States, so it's a little bit an approach from outside. And first of all, if you live in the United States, people don't consider Europe to be really an international player. They think that Europe is mainly concerned with itself for good reasons, and that they nor have the capacity nor the interest and the energy at the moment to be really an international player outside Europe. It's rather the neighborhood. There is one, of course, big exception, and here I would be interested just to learn the Polish position, if there is one, and that's TTIP. So that's a transatlantic investment and trade partnership Of course, it's very much in the interest of the German export industry. I wonder, is there already a Polish standpoint? And the second part, since I first talked about European role outside Europe and what the Polish and the German perspective might be, of course, we probably have more to concentrate on the question what Poland and Germany, how they can influence a European policy inside Europe and Eastern Partnership. Before I moved to the United States, I always had the hope that Poland's role inside the European Union would be, I was concentrating foremost on 2 points. One is, which has mentioned by Adam Rothfeld and also by Markus Meckel, that's the Eastern competence. Of course, Poles living at the eastern border of the EU have much more knowledge about the Eastern partners than, let's say, Portugal, France, for obvious reasons. So I very much agree with this. But when we try to implement it, then we have a split approach to Russia, and that is hindering sometimes the implementation of this common approach and using Polish knowledge, Polish competence towards Ukraine and Belarus. And here I would like you both to comment a little bit more on that. And the second hope I had that somehow Poland would play the role of being the leading nation of the new Eastern partners. Of course, neighbors don't like that, but for obvious reasons, in the United States, it's considered that way because they are not able, capacity-wise, to have diplomatic, very dense and intensive relations with 10 Central Eastern European countries. They normally need a lead nation which with they would cooperate a little bit more intensive. So my impression is that this hasn't become true. Polish is not considered to be, it is the biggest population-wise, economy-wise. It is, of course, the most important country within Central Eastern Europe. But I don't see, but maybe because I have been living too long outside Europe, I don't see that Poland is perceived to be in a certain way as a lead country for Central Eastern Europe, as Germany is perceived to be a lead nation for the Netherlands, for the Scandinavians, if they can always have bilateral relations with the big powers. And I would like you to comment on that. Maybe I'm wrong, or if I'm not wrong, what is the reason behind it that this expectation didn't come true?
Thanks a lot. The next on my list is Professor Osiatyński, Jacek Kucharczyk, and Daniel Brössler. Please.
Thank you. Good evening, and I apologize for being late. Now, I have a question to both speakers, and I do apologize because I couldn't hear Professor Rothfeld's early part of his presentation. But the question I want to raise is the following. For a number of years, I've been teaching my students the financial system of the Economic and Monetary Union. And because of the rising wave of new nationalism across Europe, I've been asking my students, what do they need the European Union for, except for financial transfers and except for job opportunities? What is it? In what sense the European Union has a meaning to you? What is the European Union that you would like to live in? How would you like to change it? And you will not be probably surprised to find that their identification with the European Union and their sense of the value added, except for those 2 points, is rather limited. And I wonder, how is it in Germany? How is it in other countries of the European Union? Because if we talk about Europe as a global player, as a global partner, what is our identification? Okay, from the German point of view, what is it apart from other sales markets, whether in the EU or in the EMU, with various implications, also crisis implications, that we've been seeing in the last few years. So I think I have a problem here, and we have, all of us, a problem here. And at one stage, Minister Merkel asked the question about the situation in this country, you know, after the new changes in recent changes in the government and so on. It's rather surprising to find that you stopped, to my taste, at least one gate too short, because I would expect you would tell us what is the situation with the new German coalition. What can we expect? What type of changes? Also, from the point of view of this specific perspective of tonight's discussion, okay? To what extent this is likely to strengthen the European Union, or rather to fragment it? Because I think I'm not alone in seeing those tendencies of fragmentation of the European Union. Notwithstanding what we like to talk about, opening the gates and maintaining the door, the foot in the door, and all of the rest of it, I think we may find a very peculiar situation in the new European Parliament. Not the one that we've seen. And I think unless we find a new, I apologize for using the term, okay, but I'm short of other, you know, a challenge that would have a similar sex appeal as the earlier challenges, you know, common market, common money, overcoming the Yalta division of Europe. And what is it that we have now? Okay. How can we make the common EU again attractive to young people who, with the rates of unemployment that to some extent our governments generate themselves in a number of countries of the European Union? How can we change that? Thank you.
Thank you. The questions are complicated and complicated, so please make it short, because I would like to ask our two speakers to try to answer the question. So the next one is Jacek Kucharczyk.
Thank you. Cornelius was already so kind as to mention some of the research we've been doing at the Institute of Public Affairs, and I think that this research can enlighten some of our discussion or give it some more empirical grounding. And first part is, of course, the fact that it confirms that both the perceptions of Germany and the Germans in Poland, as well as Germans' perceptions of Poles and Poland, have been improving over the recent years. It's not only that Poles see Germans more favorably, but also we have good empirical evidence that what Markus Meckel mentioned, that this Polnische Wirtschaft stereotype has been completely changed over the last years. In fact, we did a comparative studies of perceptions of Poles and Czechs in Germany, and it turned out that Poles are perceived as more hardworking than the Czechs, and that's, I think, quite a historical change in a way. So that's one part of the changes in public opinion, which I think we should be aware of, and which are quite optimistic and create good, solid foundation for Polish-German cooperation, because it shows that it's not only the elites who are talking about joint projects and joint interests, but there is awareness of it, and it spreads throughout society. The second part of our research, recent research, concerned also perceptions of Poland and Germany in countries of former Soviet Union, Eastern Partnership, mainly Ukraine and Russia. And this, I think, also had quite interesting results, because it showed considerable soft power that both our countries have, both Poland and Germany have, respectively, in Russia and in Ukraine. In fact, interestingly enough, the results for study of perceptions of Poland in Ukraine could be, in a way, compared to the results of perceptions of Germany in Russia. That is, in both cases, these countries, our countries, are seen as kind of success stories, and I would also say kind of civilizational models. I mean, the Russians' evaluations of Germany, not only German economy, but German governance, German democracy, are really very high, and in stark contrast to how the Russians evaluate the state, their own state, their own governance, their own state of economy even. And the same is true about Ukrainian perceptions of Poland. Poland is seen remarkably as a success story within the European Union, as a country which is well governed, which took opportunity and used all opportunities that European membership offered it. And to some extent, when I watch the news from Kiev now, the pro-Europe demonstrations, I think that I'm thinking about these results and how ordinary Ukrainians look at Europe in favorable way, to some extent because they believe that countries like Poland, which joined the EU, have benefited from this in more ways than one. So I think that next, when we discuss competences, we should also be aware of our soft power in those countries and try to build on it. My second remark is also about values, and it's to some extent a question, but also a polemics with what Professor Rothfeld said. Professor Rothfeld mentioned certain stereotypes about prospects for democracy in Russia related to the fact that it's orthodox, and obviously this is a kind of stereotypes which is easy to falsify, showing that Greece is also a democratic country and so on and so forth. However, I think there is another viewpoint which is less optimistic, and in fact the dialogue of the Catholic Church in Poland and the Russian Orthodox Church shows also some of the dangers that involving cultural legacies and creates and challenges for European values, because of course, it's optimistic that the Russian Orthodox Church and Polish Catholic Church could issue a joint statement, but if you actually read what this statement says, I mean, you would be much less optimistic, because what it offers, I would say, and this is my own summary, is the offer to create a kind of new holy alliance, which would be directed against women's rights, against sexual minorities' rights, and generally kind of authoritarian sort of counter-revolution. I mean, it basically sets agenda for reactionary political action. So I think we should be aware of it, that what's going on in not only in Russia but also in some other Eastern European countries is that suddenly, for example, homophobia has become a political tool which has implication also for European prospects of these countries and the European aspirations. We saw in Moldova when Orthodox Church tried to block the visa liberalization negotiations by blocking the anti-discrimination legislation, and so I think that we have a challenge, a serious challenge in terms of how European values are defined and redefined and used for political purposes to build authoritarian agenda. And my third very short comment is concerning what Markus Meckel mentioned about the forthcoming European elections and the idea of involving the populations here. I think our worry here in Warsaw and in some other countries is that actually these elections will be dominated by populists, nationalists, and other anti-European forces, and that we need to mobilize the sort of more pro-European minded citizens to also take part, because otherwise this will be left to all these we will have this paradox of European elections dominated by anti-European political forces. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel Brüssler, Klaus-Heinrich Standke, and Ambassador von Fritsch.
Yes, thank you. Well, I know that we're going to discuss Ukraine later tonight, but still I would like to raise that question because I think it's an interesting example. When we would have met a couple of weeks ago and we would have asked ourselves what's one of the most important common projects we have, Germans and Poles, we're working on right now, probably would have said Ukraine. So we should be frank now and say it's our common failure or a common disaster. Therefore, I think it would be important to do some soul searching and ask ourselves, why did that happen? What mistakes did we do? Markus Meckel asked, was it maybe a mistake to link the signature so much to the case of Yulia Tymoshenko? It's a legitimate question, even though I personally doubt that really was the problem. I don't think when we have the case of Tymoshenko, we would have a signature. That was not really. That was. I don't think that was really the point. On the other hand, the Poles very much, and rightfully so, of course, very much stressed the strategic, and much earlier than maybe the Germans did, or much more forcefully, the strategic importance of what is going on here. There, I would ask, or raise the question, having in mind how strategically important this treaty would be, can it be that for that reason sometimes it was overlooked who we are dealing with in Kiev? Was there maybe some wishful thinking, and shouldn't we ask the question, well, yes, we have strategic interests and it was very important. I personally very much believe so, very important not to leave the Ukraine to Putin's sphere of influence, but still we should always bear in mind who we are talking to in Kiev, and in a very brutal way, I think we were taught who we are dealing with. So I think there are a lot of questions, and I'm asking myself if we're going to learn that lesson together, and if Poles and Germans are going to. I know it's. I
would suggest to repeat the question to Mr. Kwaśniewski.
Okay, I'll leave it there then. Thank you.
Klaus-Heinrich.
Yeah. Well, I'm pleased to hear from Markus Meckel that this is one of the milestones, this meeting here, perhaps one of the first, on a series of strategic debates about Europe. Professor Osiatinski and myself, we attended a similar meeting early October in Paris. This was France, Poland. Many similarities. Professor Rothfeld, you started your intervention in referring to our late friend, Professor Skubiszewski. And when we recall that the Polish foreign minister, German foreign minister at that time, Genscher, French, Roland Dumas, when they met in Weimar, they did not talk about the future of Germany, France, and Poland. The joint declaration was on the future of Europe, exactly what we are talking about here. We have had since 8 summit meetings. We have had since 18 meetings of the foreign ministers of the 3 countries, plus some European ministers. We have had altogether, I think, 27 foreign ministers, one after the other, involved with this cooperation. But what is missing still today, and this may perhaps be a starting point today, is to come to some joint, concrete proposals. You refer to this joint letter to Lady Ashfeld. That's the only one we can see, which was where the 3 countries have put their heads together and so forth. The issues are all the same for all the countries. We list them today as energy, environment, student mobility, regional cooperation, innovation issues, unemployment of youngsters you refer to. These are the same for all the countries. So I think if this initiative here would indeed be able to bring at least 2 or 3 countries together, where we say with 28 it is impossible, as we have seen, to go into depth. But if we could be able, with a series of gatherings, including 2 countries, hopefully also France, Weimar Triangle, I could imagine this would be a very important breakthrough. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you very much. Representing Germany and Poland, I feel compelled to answer Professor Osiatiński's question. What do we expect, can we expect of the new government? Fortunately, that's a very simple answer, more of the same. More of the same concerning the questions we're discussing here. Concerning Europe, we can expect and we will see European integration addressed the same way we've seen it over the last year. That is a major challenge we are facing. Trying to deepen European integration, trying to make sure that European competitiveness is increased and is continued to be the major force of us being what is put here with a question mark and shouldn't have a question mark. Europe is a global player. Yes, Europe is a global player. We are the largest single economic power in the world. And if we manage to make sure this will also be true in future by addressing the reform needs in European Union, we can then, having achieved that, and we've already gone a long way in this, we can then address those other questions which are of interest to us, namely communalities in security and defense policy, for example. That's something that is lagging behind, but we can address once we have addressed the other issues. And we will see of the new government that it will make sure that this integration does not only mean increasing competitiveness. It will mean addressing questions of growth. We already are addressing questions of youth unemployment, for example. And we will see that addressing European issues will also mean a future German government will see to it that everybody's taken along. Yes, it's true, and it was pointed to that Europe is integration around the euro. And we do hope that everybody will come along one day. But integrating through the euro will also mean that we will want to make sure that those who have decided and promised to come along, like Poland, will be taken along to the extent possible while integrating around the Europe. Though it will, of course, be much easier to do so if everybody makes sure in decisions and in preparations that he will come along. We can expect of the new European government that it will address and use the communality of interest between our 2 countries. The dust of history and the noise of history settling, we can discover that there are few other countries in Europe which have such a high communality of interests. And part of this is trying to create security through interdependence. This is something very high also on the Polish agenda these days. Has been realized that security is not always defined through antagonism, through antagonizing somebody, but it is defined through being strong, yes, but through creating interdependence. This is how we create security within the European Union. We are interdependent, and whoever wants to leash out against anybody else will only hurt himself. What we can also create it in our foreign policy. And this holds true for whatever we do towards the East. And communality of interest means that there are few other countries who have such a high interest in making sure that policies that issues of Eastern policy are being addressed than Germany and Poland again. And again, this can be done through creating strength and making sure we are strong in that partnership, but also through creating interdependence. And that, for example, also holds true for energy policy. In energy policy, autarky is not necessarily a means in itself. You can also create interdependence of interest in energy policy. And energy policy in our two countries is the single largest dividing issue right now. That was rightly pointed to. Why? We have a difference of historical experience of security, again. And I think this issue will, the perception of this issue will change over the years, especially to the extent we do not address energy policy in an ideological manner, but we do so in trying to make the case for green energy being a business case. And more that's something that is of interest also, I think, in this country, that it's perceived this is a thing that is going to increase also economic interests in the longer run. So it's not really a difference in the longer run, but the mutuality of interest is of much greater importance than anything else between our two countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I ask our two speakers to give an answer in 3 minutes, because President Kwaśniewski should be in the restaurant at 7 o'clock, so please try to do it in 3 minutes.
Okay, some is said, and I don't like to repeat it, what Mr. Ambassador was saying. Coming, Irenaeus, to that point of energy, I totally agree with what was said, and my point was not to find for the current policy a compromise. It is your national decision as we have it in Germany. But the question is, when I proposed such kind of common council on that issues, to have a dialogue about that. I think it has to be clear and has to be a dialogue to understand the situation and their background of their decisions, vice versa. That is, in my view, very important, and to do it very early. When you are planning and to give that background. I think this is important. The second point is I'm really convinced that there are many points we can, in a pragmatic way, cooperate, even in the energy issues. Too, it is not only the question of coal, including the question of coal. See what happened in Germany, in the Ruhrgebiet, what happened there, and was in the technical way. I think there's a lot to learn from that and to cooperate with partners, with technology, and so on. We can go through the question of pipelines, the question of gas, the infrastructure of energy. There are so many issues we have to deal with, and we can find, if it is when we look for the aims of the European Union. In this point, I think we can find compromises if we understand each other. And that's the background for that. And this is what I had in mind when I proposed that. The question of identity, Professor, it is really a difficult question. I can't answer it for what we should do for the youth, but if I see the way of life of my own children and other people in other countries, and I think Poles, Germans, Greece, and French young people are not so different. Their way of life is a special European one, and the question is, how are we able to describe them? That way of life is a European one and not only a national one. I think this is really a challenge for us. I think it is possible. I think it is possible to convince people if you see what they are doing. For instance, domestic market. If you see that, the roaming question it is the European Parliament and the European Union fought for and was successful during the next time. The roaming was not decreasing, it will come to an end. And if you young people traveling around Europe will have that very concrete point, having the question of borders, the question of education, we can continue. We are weak in that, bringing that to the point. But this we have, and in my view, we have together to learn. And I totally agree with you, Jacek, that the populistic issue is the main issue in the next year. But it's a question of all of us, really, to make clear that the point is not that fighting parties against other. We have together in that campaign to make clear our message is a strong Europe. And not against Christian Democrats for Social Democrats or vice versa. We have a common approach towards every populist and anti-European forces in our countries. For the coalition, I totally agree. There is no real change. If you see what Social Democrats agreed during all these years when they were in the opposition, the main streamline is the same. I think that's enough.
Thank you, Markus. You have probably mentioned that Irek Bill left the conference room because President Kwaśniewski is in the basement, should be in the basement, yeah. So we'll give over to Professor Rothfeld for a few minutes, and I think we can continue all Eastern European and Ukrainian discussion during the dinner.
Yes, thank you very much. In fact, we can continue also with President Kwaśniewski, but since Ireneusz Bill left, I will not respond to him for a simple reason. He's, I would like to say that I do agree with Ambassador Freiherr von Fritsch in a sense that definitely you are right that security through interdependence, it is, I would say, the new concept of security. And it happened, I do remember, at the beginning of the 90s when many Europeans, not only in Eastern Europe, but first of all in Western Europe, in France, especially in Britain, have had, I would say, some expectations and fears whether after the new European Union, Germany will be Europeanized or Europe will be Germanized. I would like to say that all that discussion is over. Nobody is discussing, because in fact it is both, and very interesting, both. Germany for the first time is representing its own interests, but in very European way. And I would like to say that this is, in my view, Germany is more German, but at the same time more European. It is possible to reconcile this, what was presented as a kind of the antinomy. This is my first point. Second, what Professor Osiatyński raised, I would say the question that two elements which are decisive, common market and freedom of movement. And I do agree. However, in my view, the main feature of the European Union, decisive, I would say, for the modernization of Poland, is not connected with common market and freedom of movement. That was possible also without European Union, to open the markets and to abolish visa regime. Yes, this is, I would say, financial, but I would like to say that in my view, what really European Union contributed to the modernization in Poland is very often not discussed at all, namely procedures, law, and some institutions which were unknown in Poland. But now it is, I would say, part of our life, and this is, I would say, decisive. In other words, something what is in the sphere of the discussion which were considered some years ago as very abstract. Now it is the reality. But since time is limited, I would like to say Professor Jacek Kucharczyk spoke about some dismantlement of stereotypes, and he mentioned Polnische Wirtschaft. I would say that I would wish to know in next your book that another stereotype, Polish Reichstag, is also dismantled as a stereotype. But it is not up to the Germany, it is up to Poles. In my view, now I would like to say that all what we are discussing is in the context of what was known before the First World War in Europe as Hintergang des Abendlandes. In other words, we are seen by the outside world as the continent and territory in decline. And this is the problem, how to change this, because sometimes the perception became a reality and one should change, I would say, that perception. It is perception both in Asia, in the United States, and to a great extent it is very much promoted in Russia. However, for Russia, as you rightly said, it is a model, but they are not saying that it is a model. They are saying privately that it is a model, but officially, Europe is presented as a territory, the space in decline. It seems to me that my last point is, I would say, I would like not to enter into polemics. You are absolutely right that Russian Orthodox Church decided, I would say, to bring some new language and a new approach to Poland, saying even recently in Königsberg when I met with Patriarch, he spoke to me. It was more or less the table like this during the lunch, but he made a toast which was, he invited me only for the reason to pronounce some words, because the day after they were on the internet site of the Moscow Patriarchate, namely that Poland and Russia, they are condemned to be very close to each other because these two nations are neighbors by the will of the God, of Lord. And they have to contribute to the defense of the European civilization, Christian civilization, etc. When he said this, I wanted to make a call to some highest representatives of Poland, but the day after it was already presented, it was no need to inform because everybody knew. Now, the question is that very often we are in the international dialogue, in the international relations in general, in a situation that one should accept something because the price is exactly that. You are absolutely right, that Russian Orthodox Church is conservative spiritual instrument of consolidation of the Russian nation. This is on one hand. On the other, for the first time, Russian Orthodox Church accepted, I would say, the new type of relationship with Catholicism in general, and Poland is chosen as the first partner. And secondly, they promised a lot. And you are not right saying that it is only that what you mentioned. 75%, because I know the document in all details. 25% it is exactly what you said. 75% is 25% is description, and the 50% is there are a lot of very positive, I would say, thoughts, concepts and ideas for the future addressed to the Russian nation and to Polish nation, and even for simply fact that it was the first document signed in the history of the Russian Orthodox Church in 1,000 years. First visit of the Patriarch to Poland. For the first time, the document agreed upon between Russian Church and Polish Catholic Church was presented in all churches in Russia, not only in Poland. In other words, it is something what, for me, thinking about to what extent deep-rooted is negative stereotype of Russia in Poland, it means something. It is not without no doubts that it will play a role in long run, not in next 2 years, but in next 2 generations. In case that we will have, I would say, still a situation as it is now. And I would like to say that to be very, very open, I have to say that Polish conservative church is not conservative because of Russia. It is conservative for itself, and Russia can. This is, I would say, the common denominator, but it is not because of Russia. It is simply the most conservative church at the moment, probably in Europe. I would like not to say about the rest of the world, but definitely in Europe, and this is fact of life. I will stop here because, as you said...
Thank you, Professor Rothfeld. Thank you, Markus Merkel. Let's continue our discussion this evening with President Kwaśniewski. So please take your clothes and move by the lift to the basement. And there is the restaurant. We expect you there for the dinner. Thank you very much.
Thank you.